Angola, once known as America's bloodiest prison, is the largest maximum security prison in the nation. Angola had numerous enterprises: corn, cotton, soybean, and wheat crops, a licensed tap plant, printing services, a mattress factory, including suicide prevention mattresses, and a herd of 1,600 cattle. Since 1965, the prison had held a professional rodeo to entertain its inmates, employees, and the general public. Inmates participated in all but one of the events. A portion of the proceeds went toward the Louisiana State Penitentiary Inmate Welfare Fund, which paid for inmate educational and recreational supplies. Angola's storied history of instability and reform served as a reminder of the progress made within corrections and the possibilities of rehabilitation. People incarcerated at Angola paid a few cents an hour to work the same fields, picking cotton, corn, and more, from the same land slaves were forced to work 200 years ago. Angola State Prison was located on land that was originally an 8,000-acre plantation in West Feliciana Parish, in a remote region of Louisiana. The nearest town was 30 miles away. The plantation was named Angola, after the homeland of its former slaves. It traced its origins as a prison back to 1880, when inmates were housed in the old slave quarters and worked on the plantation. In those years, a private firm ran the state penitentiary. After news reports of brutality against inmates, the state of Louisiana took control of Angola in 1901. Life in prison for stealing $20. How the division is taking apart brutal criminal sentences. A 57-year-old man had been sentenced to life without parole in 1998. He had spent the last 23 years at Angola prison, serving his punishment by laboring on the fields, sweeping the prison hospital wards, and cleaning toilets at Louisiana's state. Lewis was granted his freedom at the end of last year. He wept before a judge. "God bless you," he told her. "I'll never do this again. Thank you for putting me back with my family." He had been convicted of stealing $20 in cash from a snatched purse. Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections reported a corrections officer at Louisiana State Penitentiary accused of excessive force has been booked on 2 charges. Incident happened while the inmate was being placed in restraints to be escorted to recreation. The inmate sustained minor injuries including scratches and scrapes. Louisiana State Penitentiary's Investigations Division began the investigation immediately upon the officer's emergency beeper being activated and notified the West Feliciana Parish Sheriff's Office and placed the corrections officer on investigative leave pending an investigation. A week-long investigation determined that he failed to accurately report the incident, which resulted in a warrant for his arrest. Louisiana prisoner thought he'd only had to serve a decade. 57 years later, he's free. In 1973, when legislators established different classes for murder, that is, first degree, second degree, they also raised the minimum sentence for people serving life to 20 years. 3 years later, they changed it to 40 years, then they eliminated any chance of parole for people with life sentences in 1979. The head of Louisiana's prison system is pushing state lawmakers for funding to install air conditioning at its facilities statewide to make it easier to retain correctional officers. None of the 7 prisons in the system have air conditioning for prisoner dormitories. A jury found that a former Louisiana State Penitentiary guard sexually assaulted an Angola inmate in 2014 and ordered him to pay the ex-inmate $750,000. Louisiana State Penitentiary's delivery of medical care is one of the worst we have ever reviewed. Dr. Michael Puizas, an expert in correctional medicine, argued on a stand at Louisiana State Penitentiary, known colloquially as Angola, had long neglected its duty to keep prisoners safe. A large part of that, he testified, was the failure of the Louisiana Department of Corrections to implement a system to review prisoner deaths or physician errors. "If you don't look for problems, you don't find them," Puizas said. Baton Rouge man, who was convicted earlier this year and sentenced to life in prison for the racially motivated killings of 2 men in 2017, has been found dead from an apparent hanging at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. The convicted killer, Kenneth Gleason, was found with a bed sheet around his neck. A late-night fire at the state penitentiary in Angola led to prison staff evacuating nearly 300 inmates from their living spaces. In one place, there were only 2 toilets and 1 urinal available for use and no toilet paper for at least 150 individuals. Conditions led to fights and harsh responses from guards. The letter described at least 4 reports of pepper spray being used on the evacuees. 45 years in Angola State Penitentiary, Vincent Simmons is a free man. He was convicted in 1977 of the attempted aggravated rape of 14-year-old twin sisters, a crime he said he did not commit. Louisiana man freed after 44 years in prison. Judge says he didn't get fair trial. The only way out is in a pine box, company news report said. No rodeo for me STLY, enfeebled lifers clog Louisiana prisons. Angola is not the place to be. Angola is the largest maximum security prison in the United States with 6,300 prisoners and 1,800 staff.